everyone, and welcome to another amazing episode of Military Resource Radio. My name is Tony Gatliff. I am your host here for Military Resource Radio. And folks, as we always like to do here on Military Resource Radio, we like to start off our show by reading our mission statement. And that's, what are we doing here on Military Resource Radio? Well, we're doing one thing. Actually, we're doing three things. We're connecting veterans and active duty service members with amazing resources and organizations to improve their lives. We are inspiring veterans, active duty service members, and civilians alike to get involved with these amazing resources and organizations. We are enlightening veterans, active duty service members, and civilians alike on service-related resources and benefits, like the real estate and mortgage market and process, as well as other current military news and events related to them. So that's what we're doing here on Military Resource Radio. Now, we've got a heck of a show for you today here, folks. I am here with Brian Kruger, and Brian Kruger, besides being a fellow Grosse Pointer like myself, grew up in Grosse Pointe, Michigan. Brian's there today. Brian is actually the director of an amazing film here. It's called Where the Brave Dare to Tread, the Bob Arvin Story. And this is brought to you by Stunt 3 Multimedia. It's a Brian Kruger film. Again, Where the Brave Dare to Tread, the Bob Arvin Story, from hometown hero to West Point legend. And this is an absolutely amazing story, Brian. How are you doing today, my friend?
Not too bad, Tony. Thanks for asking. It's outside of the snow outside. It's it's a good day, and I'm happy to be here with you and your folks here.
Absolutely. And what I will tell you, more so than anything, Brian, is it's been a real honor to kind of talk to you. And you were referred over by a mutual acquaintance of ours, Chuck Mosley. Shout out to Chuck Mosley down there in North Carolina, and prominently featured in the movie as well.
Absolutely. And there are a few guys out there that, had I not gotten a hold of them, the movie would not have been possible, and Chuck is certainly one of them. Excellent on film. He eats the scene up, as they say. He eats the screen up, and his stories were great. I wish I could have maybe published an hour of that interview because it's so good.
Sure.
But of course, you when you make a documentary, you shoot 20 hours and you whittle it down to about 50 minutes. So.
Absolutely. And much like any good director, right, like Scorsese or Coppola, they'll tell you they wish every movie that they made is 6 hours long, right?
Right.
But the reality is it can't be, right?
That's
so
right.
You got to cut those things down. Can you tell us just a little bit here, Brian, just for folks that sort of want to know just kind of a basic snapshot of the lay of the land of why you did this film? We can get into more of the specifics later, but what's sort of the hook for this? What makes people love this film?
It's a good question. In the business, we call that the elevator pitch. And
sure.
And this film came to me having grown up in Ypsilanti, where Bob Arvin grew up. I knew of him.
Ypsilanti, Michigan, by the way,
Ypsilanti,
for our folks,
Michigan.
our folks out there that are across the country. I mean, most people, obviously, you just say Ypsilanti, right? You don't need say. You don't.
There's another one. There's Ypsilanti, South Dakota. No, North Dakota.
Yeah, that's right. I've heard that.
And they call it Ypsilanti there. That's another story. Anyway, so yeah, I was approached. I knew of Bob's story, but very little, and I was approached by members of the Bob Arvin Foundation. Probably about 6 years ago or so. I had just finished a couple of films, and that group approached me and said, hey, this filmmaker's from Ypsilanti, would you want to do this movie? And I said, sure. And they said, give me a budget, and I gave them a budget, and it just wasn't in the works. Fast forward a couple of years after that, 3 years after that, and I was playing golf one day, actually, and I started to think about this film and realizing the age of all the guys who would have been involved, and I thought, I need to make this movie now. Being a documentary filmmaker, it's much easier to do a film when the people are alive that you can talk to that knew the story firsthand. And I had in Ypsilanti, Bob's Ypsilanti friends, and then in the West Point group, I had his West Point friends. So I said, let's go do this. Let's try to get it done quickly.
Sure. And so you basically had kind of, his early days. Like you said, you grew up in Ypsilanti, and so did he. So that's a huge coincidence, right?
Yeah,
just to begin with. And then, the second thing, you had contacts with his West Point friends, which it's just an amazing film, folks. By the way, again, Where the Brave Dare to Tread, the Bob Arvin Story. And where is the film available for folks out there that want to see it?
It's available at stunt3.com. That's STUNT3.com. And all of our films are available there. And if you just look at the store, or you'll see them, it's obvious when you go on that website, you can find it. You can also stream it live. Going to the same website, it'll take you there. There's a menu item called streaming, and it'll take you there as well. So you can buy a DVD or you can stream it. And I really, really recommend you look at this, not because I made it, but here's one of these stories that involves a guy that shows character and courage and perseverance, everything that really you would love to see today's youth demonstrate. And I'm not making any editorial statements there, but it just seems that guys that came out of the first era baby boomers that actually were born either during the war or right after the war and lived in an idyllic America, even then, some of them went off the rails. This guy did not. And what this guy accomplishes in his 24 years is astounding. And I think it's uplifting and it's motivational beyond compare. So,
and it's very interesting that you say that, because you and I were just discussing here off air a little bit some of the pitfalls of today's youth. But we could go on and on about our day when hot dogs were a nickel.
That's right. I don't want to go too far that way.
Yeah. Right. But no, I wanted to say as everyone knows here, by the way, who listens to Military Resource Radio is on the BBMC Mortgage Radio Network, and our president of retail mortgage, Todd Jones, is a 1990. I always forget if it's 94 or 95. Sorry, Todd. He's a 94 or 95.
It means something to those guys, so you got to get that right.
It does. It means a lot to him. And each time that I talk about this, I'm never sure if it's 94 or 95. Drives me crazy. But anyways, Todd is a 94 or 95 graduate of West Point. And it's interesting. I saw a picture once of him in his initial cadet outfit, right? Which Bob Arvin is here on the cover of your DVD in his initial cadet outfit. And it's weird, but he kind of looks like Todd.
Wow.
There's just I think there's a resemblance to a certain extent of everybody that goes to West Point, because they kind of give everybody the same haircut. They're all in good shape, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But they kind of look alike. It's a little weird.
That's funny. I had to use a stand-in for Bob for particular scenes at the end of the movie that we used. And we got Ross Reason, and Ross Reason is a cadet at West Point, and he's a Birmingham Brother Rice kid.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and he had just finished his plebe year, and it was recommended to me by Walter Orline, who was an associate producer of the film, and really just opened up every door at West Point that I needed, and I couldn't have done it without him. He said, "Look, we got to use Ross Reason, and this kid I know out of Birmingham, Brother Rice, is a lacrosse player." And I said, sure. So we get Ross in the outfit, and you stand him 10 feet away, and it's the same thing. It's like, geez, there's Bob. And
wow.
the way I used him in the movie, it really comes out looking really cool.
Just like
it's a real nice effect that I just had. When you watch the movie, toward the end of the film, I have sort of a half-transparent figure walking through the old places that Bob grew up, the old Ypsi High School in Ypsilanti, West Point, some of his just places where he was. And we used Ross, and it's great. So I get exactly what you mean. You put that guy in that gray uniform.
Yeah,
it's moving. It's
really
moving.
It is. It really is. And that's interesting that you say that. And this is off topic a little bit, and we're coming up on our first break here, but. Did you see Social Network, the movie about Facebook?
Yeah.
That was pretty remarkable, I thought, what they did with the one guy Army hammer, and then they had the stand-in that was built and looked exactly like him, and then they just kind of did the faces.
So cool. It's both cool and a little frightening what they can
It really is. It is a little frightening. That's a great way to put it. Well, folks, we're coming up on our first break here with Military Resource Radio, and I did want to mention one thing here before we get back to a little bit more with Brian Kruger here, the director of Where the Brave Dare to Tread, the Bob Arvin Story. And I want to mention one quick thing before we go into our first break, and that is this. All the latest and greatest information about our show is available at militaryresourceradio.com. Here, what you can do is you can head on over to our website. You can take a look at previous and past episodes of the show. You can take a look at contacting us either by phone or by email, and you can absolutely make sure that if you do contact us, we do respond to all of our listeners out there. And absolutely do get to those folks each and every single week. So please keep the great feedback coming. We're really, really happy with what we get and what the show means to others out there. Again, I am Tony Gatliff, your host of Military Resource Radio. We're going to be back here in just a couple of minutes after some messages from our sponsors here with Brian Kruger, the director of Where the Brave Dare to Tread, the Bob Arvin Story. Stick around. We'll be right back. Hello, folks. Tony Gatliff back here with Brian Kruger, director of Where the Brave Dare to Tread, the Bob Arvin Story. That's available at stunt3.com. That's stunt, like stuntman, the number 3.com. And you can get the film on DVD or streamed. Pretty amazing in terms of just being a movie that's out there and that's a lot of people are talking about and is getting a great emotional reaction from a lot of folks out there. Very personal, very emotional, but a great film. And Brian and I were sort of talking off air. Whereas the Ken Burns Vietnam documentary is sort of a thing that kind of spans the whole entire war from all sides, and that's great, and it's an awesome documentary. If folks have not seen it, it's amazing. We've actually got Ken Burns coming up on the show here on Military Resource Radio soon. But this is more of a personal one-man story, and in many ways, I think that's even more relatable to folks, Brian.
Yeah, I agree, and. Look, when you do a story about a soldier, it's one thing. When you do a story about a Vietnam soldier and you're over the age of 40, I think, 45 probably, sometimes, unfortunately, very unfortunately, Vietnam draws a tough connotation. When you do a film about a hero that is that was killed in Vietnam, it can go off the rails in another way. I really wanted to make this film a tribute to a hero from our small town, and you know what you find out is he was a hero and a legend at West Point as well. So it's a story about him. I don't really get into the politics of Vietnam, of the Vietnam War. All of that was sad, and I will tell you this straight away. After starting to make this movie, both with the West Point grads that I talked to, as well as other military folks I've talked to, the soldiers, I could have made that film about any of them, enlisted men, West Point men. I mean, I wasn't in the military, but this, in the last 24 months, has really made me feel much more patriotic about every veteran, especially from the Vietnam War. Meeting them has been humbling, probably the most humbling thing that I can imagine. I put them on par with every World War veteran. They were good men. All of them are good men. Sadly, the end of that story is tough, but I really wanted to put a spotlight and a focus on who these guys were, and in this case, who Bob Arvin was, because I think that his story could influence a ton of other people in our lives, and especially our kids, and we can get to that in a minute, how I plan to get that out. So.
Absolutely. Let's talk about you for just a couple of minutes here, Brian.
Goodness.
Yeah, so you've had quite an interesting life. We're probably going to have to go into a little bit next segment about it, because you've had a couple of careers here. So as you mentioned before, Bob Arvin and you are both from Ypsilanti, Michigan.
That's correct.
Which is about 15 minutes from Ann Arbor. It's between Detroit and Ann Arbor here in Michigan. And if you're here in the southeastern Michigan area, you just call it Ypsi.
That's right.
Okay, first of all.
Yep.
Secondly, Bob Arvin graduated from Ypsilanti High School in 1961.
The year I was born. Yep.
Yeah, you were a student at Ypsilanti Public Schools for 11 years. You left your sophomore year, and you graduated from Chelsea High, which Chelsea is kind of like a more rural community, a little bit outside of Ann Arbor.
That's right.
Well known for being the home of Jeff Daniels of Dumb and Dumber and Arachnophobia fame.
That's correct. Jeff is from Chelsea.
Yeah,
right.
and
still
I guess
lives there.
Yes, still lives there, right?
Yeah.
Yep. And he has a theater there, Purple Rose Theater,
yeah.
right? Yeah. Yep. And so you were also a teacher at Ypsilanti High for a few years in the late 80s. So tell us about that. What made you want to go into teaching?
Oh, it's I think a lot of kids do that. It just stuck with me. Some of the most influential people in my life were teachers, so I just thought I got to do this. I was in theater in school and liked performing, and to me it sounded like you had a gig every day because you were in front of a bunch of people. You're in front of an audience every day.
Sure.
What could be cooler?
Sure.
So at 22 and 23, I thought this would be great. I wasn't ready quite for the pay scale and the job security. So
sure, that happens.
Yeah, I got an offer that kind of doubled or tripled my salary, and then went on from there and got into software and mostly into newspaper publishing software and magazine publishing software. And I was a stringer for the Ann Arbor News at the same time, so I was a sports writer, and just got into that whole business. And right about the exact same time, I left teaching in the very early 90s. I became part of a 4-person stand-up comedy group called Stunt Johnson Theater. It's why my company's called Stunt 3. I was the third guy in the group. And yeah, we started in Ann Arbor at the Main Street Comedy Showcase one night and quickly took off from there. We're playing Mark Ridley's here when they were up on Catalpa here in Royal Oak, Michigan.
Sure, yeah.
And I will say loosely discovered by Tim Allen before he signed with Disney, and really gave us a nice boost and became a touring act. And I've played Las Vegas, L.A., we've opened for the Smothers Brothers and worked with Rich Little and folks like that. But it's funny because I tell my son that, who's a really nice kid, Dan, and Dan will politely say that those sound like great guys, but he has no idea the impact that the Smothers Brothers had, ironically, for the Vietnam War
okay.
in the 60s.
So if you read my bio on and first of all, that's amazing. We're getting to more of that in our Iron Man segment, which is coming up next. But, and I'm furiously writing as you're talking here, but if you look at my bio right on militaryresourceradio.com, it will tell you that probably my favorite movie that's ever been made is Casino. And Dick Smothers has quite a cameo in that.
He does.
I will give you $20 right now if you can tell me the real life politician that Dick Smothers was portraying.
Oh, goodness, I don't know.
Harry Reid.
Oh, wow.
And we're going to be back here in just a couple minutes with more of our Iron Man segment with Brian Kruger from Where the Brave Dare to Tread, the Bob Arvin Story. Stick around for a little bit more of Military Resource Radio, and you're going to hear a little bit more about Brian's brushes with fame and a couple other things here in the next segment. Looking forward to it. Hey folks, Tony Gatliff back here on Military Resource Radio with our Iron Man segment. And folks, you know why we call it the Iron Man segment. It's 15 minutes long. This is where we can really get into the meat and potatoes with our guests in terms of what they have to say. We're here again with Brian Kruger, director of Where the Brave Dare to Tread, the Bob Arvin Story, available at stunt3.com through Stunt 3 Multimedia. And real quick, before we get back to Brian Kruger and his blessed life, where he has had so many brushes with fame, and one we're going to really talk about, I want to go over a couple quick things, folks. Again, as folks know out there, Military Resource Radio is on the BBMC Mortgage Radio Network. And BBMC Mortgage is a full-service residential lender operating in all 50 states across the country, from Alaska to Hawaii to Maine to Florida. Everywhere in between, BBMC Mortgage has got you covered. So, folks, if you are looking to talk to someone about a mortgage, real estate, you have questions about anything related to a mortgage or real estate, head on over to militaryresourceradio.com and hit the Contact Us tab to contact us via email. And if you don't want to be contacted via email and you want to talk to someone, just dial us up. Our number is 888-366, the number 4 and the letters MRR. Numerically, that's 888-366-4677. Again, that number, 888-366, the number 4, Mike Romeo out there for our folks who speak in military phonetic alphabet out there. I did want to mention that. And as well, folks, what we always do here on Military Resource Radio, no matter what, we send a thank you to all of our veterans and active duty service members around the country and around the world for everything that they're doing. Brian said it earlier, but I say it again. Frankly, folks, without those veterans and active duty service members out there, we couldn't be doing fun things like we're doing right now. And that's the reason that Military Resource Radio exists, to connect you folks with resources and things that you might be interested in. And whether you're a veteran, civilian or not, you will be very, very happy to take a look at Where the Brave Dare to Tread, the Bob Arvin Story. It's a Brian Kruger film, and it's absolutely amazing. We're going to get into that more later. But, Brian, we kind of got cut off. We went into a long conversation about Dick Smothers that we kind of had to end there. But, it's very interesting. You said, Tim Allen was very nice to you before he had signed with Disney for Home Improvement. He was a stand-up comic that was sort of on the rise at that time.
Very much so, yeah.
And he was, actually I heard him on Adam Carolla's podcast not too long ago talking about Mark Ridley's Comedy Castle.
Yeah, cool.
Actually.
Yeah, he's always great about coming back to Ridley's place. And, when he saw our act, we were different. We put one of our guys on stage, and the three of us got in the audience, and we just heckled the guy on stage from different political standpoints.
Funny.
Yeah, and he liked that. So he said, hey, you guys, work here all week or do something. And we ended up working there. And Mark Ridley liked us, and we became friends with Mark for a long time after that. And when he moved downtown Royal Oak, we became headliners down there, and it was great. It was a lot of fun.
Wow, that's amazing. And so, this work as being a stand-up comic, were you doing it while you were teaching at the same time?
Yep. And so we all had day jobs. I think we made enough money to make it interesting for one guy, but there was a bunch of us
to go around for four was not going to happen.
It was tough, but it was fun. It was during the time just before cable not killed, but kind of wounded the comedy club, because there used to be a bunch of them out there. And then stand-up comics were on cable a lot, so it wasn't such an interesting night out anymore, I think. But a lot of them closed during the 90s and early 2000s. So.
Well, yeah, it was interesting. I mean, if you remember during the 80s, those stand-up comedy specials, first of all, you have the ones that are up here, right?
Yeah.
And by the way, I know everybody over radio can see where I'm motioning right now.
It's up there. I can confirm it.
Yeah, Brian can confirm it's up there. But, you have Eddie Murphy, Raw,
those guys
Goonie
are doing fine. Yeah.
you have Delirious, you have, all the stuff that was really high. But I remember seeing even that that Sinbad one where he's in that purple and orange jumpsuit.
Those were huge.
That thing was played, every week it seemed like when I was a little kid. I remember that thing by heart.
But it was funny, yeah. And then there's this whole other tier of comics, and we were this tier that would be out there working with guys that you forgot about. We used to work with Frank Gorshin, who was the Riddler on the old Batman series.
Absolutely, the original Riddler.
Yeah, so there'd be guys like that, which we loved. It was fun. It was
and Rich Little, you were saying too, right? Rich Little, and I could be wrong. He's definitely before my time, but wasn't he a big impressionist? That was really his.
Yeah, we talk about that a lot, because there were a lot of them. You couldn't watch a Tonight Show episode with Johnny Carson without an impersonator on there, and we were trying to break that down the other day. And I think you don't see him as much anymore, and I think it's because back then there were 3 television stations that everybody watched. So in an audience, everybody had the same reference to about 40 people, and Rich Little could do about 30 of them well. So or any impersonator, Gorshin was a good one. So when they made reference to somebody on stage, everybody knew who it was. Now there's so many things going on in television or entertainment. I think an impersonator would do an impersonation of Steve Sharippa, and you'd have to really think about who that was, unless you were in there.
Right. It's people are Soprano. I think I've seen a couple episodes. Right, because everything's so fragmented.
Yeah,
right.
It's huge. And back then, we all had the same reference.
Exactly. Yeah. You asked somebody the other day, have you seen you asked somebody years ago, have you seen Batman on TV? It's like, yes, the one with Adam West and Burgess Meredith, Frank
You guys
Gorshin.
are becoming more and more extinct, though, especially under the age of 50. So.
But nowadays, it's like, hey, have you seen the Batman TV show? It's like, which one? The cartoon that was on in the 90s or the one now or the one,
or the movies?
Right. Which one? The Clooney one, the Kilmer one, the Keaton one?
Things are different.
It's everything's so fragmented. I think you're right. You know, in terms of that. But you bring up Steve Sharippa, and it's so funny when you told me that you knew him very well. I said, "Oh my God, we have to talk about this because
he was the doorman at the Riviera when we were doing comedy in the early '90s,
and that's how he started, right?" So, folks, if you don't know who Steve Sharippa is, and we're talking about him, he is. If you've ever seen Sopranos, he would be Bobby Bacala on The Sopranos, and then he would also be. He's on Blue Bloods, playing the district attorney investigator alongside Bridget Moynihan, who plays Tom Selleck's daughter on the show.
That's right.
And oh my God, Brian, it's so funny. I cannot wait to tell my fiance, the lovely Ashley, that we talked about Blue Bloods today.
Oh, I love that show. My wife and I love that show.
And I love the show too. Let me tell you, Ashley doesn't love it as much, and she's really gotten her fill of it over the last couple months.
All right.
She's been every time she hears the theme song come on, she's like rolling her eyes like, oh my God, again. I've been going through it on Netflix, so I've been watching quite a bit of it recently, so it's interesting. I can't wait to tell her. But it's interesting that you've had these relationships with these people that have went on to become famous. You're a documentary filmmaker, and it's just your life seems very, very, very interesting. Like it's taken some interesting turns.
Yeah, it's really been interesting. My wife says so too. When I got out of the software business, she said, "What are you going to do now?" And I said, "Make educational documentaries." Oh, really?
Great, just as lucrative, right?
That's right. But we got a couple Emmy nominations, so she liked the parties, and that made it cooler. So.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah,
right.
So all of a sudden, it was cool. So.
Yeah, all of a sudden, being on the red carpet, now it's cool, right?
That's right. Yeah.
No. So let's talk a little bit in regards to your, you went into the software business, which I think you were the CEO of Woodwing USA, correct?
That's correct. Yep.
Okay, so what was Woodwing USA?
So it was a small Dutch company that made editorial workflow software. It let or writers of magazine and newspaper stories work with the guys who laid the pages out. And it was before the cloud. And what this software did is allowed those guys to work together on the pages at the same time instead.
So sort of a predecessor to a cloud.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And so that was cool, and it was very efficient, and it was fun being a software company in publishing in Detroit during the 80s, because I used to get made fun of by the guys on the coast, both in LA and in New York, the Hearsts and the Time and the big publishers, and they'd say, "So you're working in the publishing capital of the world there in the Motor City, right?" And they kept trying to kept trying to get us to move our headquarters to Silicon Valley or at least New York, and we stayed in Detroit, down at the Ford Building down in Griswold and Congress, and we're really proud of those years. Wow. Had a crew of about 30, I think it was our top number, just young people. It's sort of what you see down there now,
right?
Only we were doing it in 2000 to 2008. So.
Well, what I was going to say is, folks, for those of you who aren't out there, you maybe don't know that much about Detroit. There's been a resurgence about the last 10 years of Detroit, a huge resurgence. But you were down in downtown Detroit when it was a veritable ghost town.
That's right.
And that's pretty amazing. That's a testament to you and your company. What a great job you folks have
Well, like I say, we were there, and I don't know if we caused any of that. I think the big movers were the Dan Gilberts and stuff, but my father-in-law used to always say that you could shoot a cannon off and not hit it down Woodward and not hit anybody after 4 o'clock, and that is not the case anymore. Now it's young people. It's jammed. The more bars and restaurants are open. It's great.
Sure. And you and I are both members down at the Detroit Athletic Club.
That's right, the DAC. Well. Fantastic.
Yep. And it's funny, we didn't even know each other before we started talking about this. It's like weird, you have all these people who go, "Yeah, do you know so-and-so? He's a member at the DAC," and like 9 times out of 10, you're like, I have no idea.
Yeah.
Unless he's there when I'm there Tuesdays and Thursdays after 6:30 p.m.
That's right.
I don't know him.
That's right.
That's kind of the thing. But, okay, folks, real quick, wanted to mention one other thing here with our Iron Man segment, and that is BBMC Mortgage and our Patriots Charity Initiative. Folks, what does our Patriots Charity Initiative do, and how does it work? Well, in an effort to say thank you to all the men and women for their commitment, bravery, and sacrifice for our country, BBMC Mortgage started the Patriots Charity Initiative in 2015. Through this program, we donate $150 of each and every funded loan's proceeds to one of 4 veteran charities. And those charities that we work with are the USO, the Mission Continues, Headstrong, and Team Rubicon. Folks, I just heard the numbers today. Since 2015 at BBMC Mortgage, we have donated $2.3 million to these 4 charities. So we're very proud of that here at BBMC. I also wanted to mention just very quickly our terrestrial and online outlets that are out there. Where can you listen to Military Resource Radio? Well, you're listening to it now, so you obviously do have one outlet for it, but just to let everyone know, online we are available on iTunes, SoundCloud, Spreaker, Google Play, Player FM, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, which works in conjunction with your Amazon Alexa device. All you got to do is walk up to your Alexa device and say, Alexa, play Military Resource Radio podcast. If you do that, the last episode of Military Resource Radio will just start playing for you. No programming, nothing needed. As well, you can head on over to militaryresourceradio.com, where each and every previous episode of the show is available as well. You can listen to us on terrestrial radio. We are in Chicago on WIND, AM 560. We are here in Detroit on AM 1270, WXYT. Fort Hood and Austin, Texas, KTEM, News Radio 14. Washington, D.C., AM 570, The Answer. Jacksonville, Florida, AM 600, The Answer. Los Angeles on KABC, Talk Radio 790. And in Tampa, Florida on WGUL, AM 860, The Answer. So, folks, I did just want to mention that as well. And all those are available on militaryresourceradio.com. You can click each station and see when we're available. But Brian, we only have a minute or so left here on this this segment here, our Iron Man segment here. What's the one thing that you would want people to take away from Where the Brave Dare to Tread, the Bob Arvin story?
That anybody, if they put perseverance and dedication and honesty to their lives, can make a big difference, not only in the people around them, but people they meet and the impact they have on others. What happens with this kid out of this little town called Ypsilanti, Michigan? I mean, if you go to West Point now, the cadet training facility is called the Arvin Cadet Physical Development Center. 500,000 square foot facility is named after this guy from Ypsilanti, and that's right alongside buildings named after Eisenhower, Grant, Pershing.
Yeah.
Right? And so it's a real...
And they don't just name buildings after people at West Point. They've had a lot of people go through there, and, and not everybody gets a building.
That's right. And that's covered in this film, too, how that all came about. So it's fascinating.
Amazing, amazing. Well, we'll be back here with our final segment here with Brian Kruger, director of Where the Brave Dare to Tread, the Bob Arvin Story. We'll be back in just a couple minutes. Hey everyone, Tony Gatliff back with more Military Resource Radio. I'm here with Brian Kruger, director of Where the Brave Dare to Tread, the Bob Arvin Story, hometown hero and West Point legend. And that's available again at stunt3.com, STUNT3.com. And Brian, tell us a little bit, I wanted to get into this a little bit with you. What are you doing with the movie right now to get it out there, to get it out to the masses?
Right. So when I founded Stunt 3 Multimedia, my writer, Buddy Morehouse, who's worked on nearly everything we've done, not this one, but nearly everything we've done together, we wanted to tell stories of people that what they've done is sort of faded away, and if you don't get it done digitally now, it might fade forever. And if you look at our catalog on stunt3.com, you'll see that all of our stories are like that. And this was one. So one of the things that we had to do is, and if you're like me, you like documentaries, but you don't buy them. And I'm a documentary filmmaker, right?
Sure.
So what we started doing a long time ago is, and I actually came up with this while I was mowing the lawn, I've run into a lot of people who want to be part of our documentaries. So starting with, I think it was Black and Blue, our film about Gerald Ford and Willis Ward, we had the Kellogg Foundation helped us distribute that film into high schools and public libraries around the state of Michigan. So what I do is I make educational versions of each film, which is the movie, as well as lesson plans and study guides for a teacher who doesn't know anything about the movie. They can literally look at it that night. Comes with the DVD. And bonus material like all of the images that we used and maybe got cut out of the film. And it's really just, it's a lesson plan in a box that we do with our film. So this one we've done with a wonderful and generous donation from the Sane family. They donated enough to put a copy of this film in every public library in the state of Michigan, and those are being distributed as we speak. Our next project is to put a copy of this film, the educational version, into every high school in the state of Michigan. So the Bob Arvin story not only gets told, but gets taught, that this kind of perseverance, this kind of character, a student, boy or girl, could think about what they can do with their lives to move forward in a very efficient way. So the educational version of this film is going to be distributed to every high school, and we've started a GoFundMe page, and it's gofundme.com/Bob Arvin, or you can find it at stunt3.com as well. And you too can contribute. If you want to be part of this Bob Arvin experience, you can contribute to get that out to all of the high schools in the state of Michigan, Bob's home state. We're really, really excited about that, and we love hearing from teachers, and we have over the years to say, hey, I got your film, I use it in the classroom, and this was really helpful, thank you very much. Because schools are so bound now by budgets that don't allow them, especially in the humanities like this, to be able to get material. If it's not science, it's not math, it's hard to get material. So being able to give these away to schools has been it's been worth it to me to move away from real commercial business into somewhat of a philanthropic version of filmmaking. Not only is it commercial, you can buy the film, but I really like giving it to classrooms to be able to be used. So if anybody goes to stunt3.com and they look at the GoFundMe menu item, they can see how they can contribute. If you contribute $50, you get a film. I'll sign it for you. If you contribute more than that, there's a poster involved, and you'll just know that for every dollar you give, it's really going to putting this story and telling the story in classrooms, because teachers will use them. We found that so many teachers use the things that we give them in class because it really helps them get through a school year and say, hey, great, this is a fully baked lesson. I can do it for a day, 2 days, a week, and it can be a lesson in character. So I'm excited about that. So if there's anybody out there that wants to contribute to that effort, we're on GoFundMe.
Absolutely, folks. Again, go to stunt3.com or gofundme.com/Bob Arvin, BOBARVIN. And Brian's going to be back a little bit more next week here on Military Resource Radio to tell us a little bit more about that. I know he's looking forward to it, as are we. And folks, before we end today on Military Resource Radio, I actually have some sad news to pass along. Unfortunately, my prospective father-in-law, my fiance Ashley's father, Craig Gatowski, unfortunately passed away very suddenly and very unexpectedly in the last several weeks here. And I wanted to talk a little bit about Craig because he was a huge fan of Military Resource Radio, and I think partially it was because myself, his son-in-law-to-be, was the host, but I also think he cared a lot about veterans, active duty service members, and military issues. Craig would get up every Sunday at 7 a.m. and listen on AM 1270 here in Detroit, listen to the show, and Craig was just a great guy, salt-of-the-earth type of person. When he looked you in the eye and he shook your hand, you knew that you had a deal. You didn't need a contract. That's just the type of person he was, a person who cared about his wife and his daughters very much, made his whole life about his family, and unfortunately taken all too soon off of this earth. But I did want to mention a couple things. You know, the reason that Craig was so huge in terms of veterans and active duty service members was his father, Alfred Gatowski, was a World War II veteran, and Craig had saved a flag and some bullets from Alfred's service, and that was down in his man cave, and he always very much revered that. Also, too, Craig would go to the Knights of Columbus Hall in Dearborn, Michigan, to tell stories and have a drink and have a burger with some World War II veterans and Vietnam vets and Korean War vets that he had known there for years, and so he made that a part of his life. As well, when I was down in Pearl Harbor this past December, Craig had sent me a text saying, you're really doing a great service for these veterans with the radio show that you're doing, and he just thought it was so cool when I was sending him pictures of the veterans from Pearl Harbor that I was interviewing, and he was just very excited about it, and I know he was a big fan of the show, and I just kind of wanted to talk about this a little bit today because Craig, when I was at West Point in October, I actually came back off my flight from West Point on Craig's birthday. So for his birthday, I had gotten him a West Point hooded sweatshirt, a Nike sweatshirt that said Army Black Knights. I had also gotten him for Christmas, which I saved for him, an Army football sweatshirt. And he just loved these things. He said they were the greatest sweatshirts he's ever worn, and they were really comfortable and all that. But I think part of the reason was he wanted to rep those Army West Point colors. He was very, very enthralled with West Point and the Army-Navy game and all the stuff that I've gotten to do here through Military Resource Radio. But I gave him both those sweatshirts. He loved them, and he actually passed away in that Army football sweatshirt. And I think he would have had it no other way. Frankly, he loved that sweatshirt. He loved the Army, loved the military, and I just wanted to say rest in peace to Craig Gutowski, a great guy who will be missed by his family for a long time. And that's going to be it for Military Resource Radio today. I'm Tony Gatliff. We'll talk to you folks next week.